Good Monday afternoon to you. I hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Plenty to talk about. So we'll talk about the Browns, talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. A little bit later in the show, we will talk Cavs with Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. But we begin by talking Browns and the Super Bowl. So word came out today, and in fact, Odell Beckham Jr., another torn ACL, same ACL that he was recovering from all off season. So Odell Beckham Jr. Did in fact tear that left anterior cruciate ligament. We're going to welcome in Scott Petrak. And Scott, I know you wrote an article about this. It was very interesting, just the way the whole Odell leaving Cleveland was portrayed during the Super Bowl. Take us through that article and just some of the things about it.
Yeah, it was something, Dave, that it was even before the broadcast last night, just kind of in the run-up to the Super Bowl. I remember ESPN's Ryan Clark. I think he called him the best redemption story of the Super Bowl. And that just struck me because I didn't see it that way. You know, I mean, he's being portrayed as a guy that got him, you know, that was in such a bad situation in Cleveland and, you know, he had to get away. Well, you know, I understand he didn't get the ball as much as he wanted and probably as much as he should have. But that doesn't mean the situation was awful. It wasn't like Odell was treated poorly here. And there's nothing that, I mean, he was under contract. There's nothing that says he shouldn't have stayed and tried to make things better. And he didn't do that. He got frustrated. He didn't respond when his dad put out that video that threw Baker under the bus and then criticized Baker. There was no apology from Odell. There was no, hey, Dad, take that down. There was none of it because he was trying to get his way out of town. So you heard that all that going up to the Super Bowl, and it struck me as wrong, even if they had lost, right? It wasn't a redemption story. And then they win, and Odell, you know, during the broadcast, Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth are talking about him, you know, the Browns throwing him under the bus and, you know, just getting rid of him. That's not how it was. Odell asked for trades and wanted to be gone. So I just didn't like how that was portrayed, and I think it's not right that Odell won a Super Bowl and everybody goes, oh, well, it worked out okay. That doesn't mean the way he got himself out of Cleveland, that doesn't mean he handled that situation correctly at all.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing that I would say, if you look at the Browns players, there seems to be a lot of support for Odell. Just on social media, let's take a look at this. For instance, you know, Mac Wilson, you know, some of you people saying OBJ doesn't deserve it, you're all insane. You know, he was a great teammate, meant to us on the field, off the field. So, you know, the one thing that I would say, Scott, we don't know the dynamics in the locker room, especially because of COVID, but it certainly sounds like he had a lot of support within the locker room for the Browns.
Yeah, I find that really interesting too. You know, I remember talking to people in 2019, right, when we were in the locker room, just off the record, talking to players and guys saying, hey, Odell's not how he's portrayed. You know, you hear bad stuff or, you know, you hear the kind of the narrative about Odell, right? He's just this big persona. And then you get to be around him and he's not like that. And, you know, he would, if an equipment company was sending him something, he would ask for 60 so he could hand them out to his teammates. And he endeared himself to guys, and I know that he works hard. There's no doubt about that. So I do think he's a good teammate. When Mac Wilson says, I don't think he's making that up. However, I think there's a difference between being likable and being a good teammate, maybe in the locker room, versus, you know, trying to work your way out of town, right? And that's what I think the Browns, some of his teammates have a hard time differentiating. They just say, hey, we like Odell. He was always good when he was around us. But they don't know that he was asking for a trade for 2 years. And I don't think the Browns wanted to throw Odell under the bus as an organization, so they just kind of let it be. But, you know, the reality is he no longer wanted to play with those guys. And if his teammates think it's because it's okay because he didn't get the ball enough, then that's their right to have that opinion. I just disagree with that. I think you got to kind of tough it out through the tough times. And Odell, in my opinion, didn't do that. But it is noteworthy that his teammates continue to stick up for him and root for him.
The other thing that I found kind of interesting, the whole narrative with, you know, the Browns kicked. The Browns didn't have to. They could have told him stay home and you know, we'll pay you, and kind of, you know, for lack of a better term, held him hostage. They didn't do that. They not only didn't they do that, They made sure he was a free agent so he could sign with somewhere where he thought it was the best situation for him. So really, and you know, I'm not saying that there's this benevolent thing. You do that because you don't want the rap with players and free agents of saying, oh, you don't want to go there. You know, that right now I would imagine Andrew Berry has rep being a pretty decent guy because of the way they treated him.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point too. That's a tough situation because, you know, some of the rules have changed and I don't know how long you can just keep a guy out. But he made it an untenable situation. And then the Browns and Andrew Berry tried to do the best they could to salvage something from that and not have to pay Odell everything he was due. And, you know, worked with him to save some money, but also to have him become a free agent like he wanted. So, I mean, it was such a tricky situation. And in fact, it was a turning point, a seminal moment in this season. Where you talk about all the ways this season went bad, that whole Odell situation is near the top of the list. And there's plenty of guilty parties when you talk about how he was used. But to me, the guiltiest party for getting him, you know, for him leaving the team, it's Odell.
Yeah, and it's, you know, again, now we can officially move on from that. It is unfortunate. It appears it's torn ACL, which means he's likely out all of next year. It would be really tough for him to come back. You know, you do the 9-month thing from now, and you're at the beginning of the season probably.
Yeah, that is really unfortunate. I mean, you know, all the stuff I wrote about Odell has nothing to do with him personally. I liked dealing with him, and you don't wish, you know, injury on anybody. And the fact that it's the same ACL, the same knee, you would think that the rehab would be more complicated. And I know he was tired of rehabbing. You know, he had the core muscle surgery the previous offseason. He had the broken leg with the Giants. So he's been dealing with a lot physically. And, you know, I think obviously this year he could still play. We saw that. I saw it in practice with the Browns, and then we saw it during his time with the Rams. You just wonder how much more his body can take.
Yep. All right, time for us to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Super Bowl.
I just got done watching the Super Bowl, and I thought, no better place to go right now than the voicemail of Truth and Reason. So, to loyal fans of Cleveland, I share with you this. The Bengals win again, 5-0, against the spread of 4 points or more. They did it. I don't know who I feel worse for, if I feel worse for the Bengals for losing or for Aaron Donald and the Los Angeles Rams for winning a game with the laundry on the field. I don't know, man. Bengals win 5-0 this year. I appreciate it. You guys are doing a great job. Thanks.
All right, we appreciate the call. I feel worse for the Bengals without question. You know, that's a tough one to lose. You have the lead under 2 minutes, and just Rams found a way to get it done.
Yeah, it felt to me like, especially in the second half, right? The first half, the Rams were, you know, winning throughout. That the Bengals had chances to put the game away and to really expand that lead because the Rams weren't doing anything on offense. We know they couldn't run the ball on third and long. You know, Stafford would hold the ball. He took some sacks. Not having Odell out there for the second half was really affected their offense. They're missing their tight end, Higbee. So the Bengals had chances, but then, you know, the Rams' pressure started to heat up. Burrow gets sacked 6 times, and they just let the Rams hang around and hang around. And I understand, you know, the frustration with the officiating. It's been a topic all year long. But I didn't think the officials decided that game. You know, I thought the worst call of the whole night was the non-call on the T. Higgins touchdown where he yanks Jalen Ramsey's face mask, right? That's a 75-yard touchdown could have changed the game. It could have changed the outcome. So those flags at the end didn't really bother me.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you, the officiating very rarely dictates the outcome of a game, and I'm with you. The face mask, Higgins on Ramsey was far and away the worst. That was a non-call in that, but they missed that one. This one I found interesting, Scott. Leading rusher from Super Bowls team winners and their salaries, and we go back the last 13 years, and when you look at it, you know, the highest paid guy, you had Percy Harvin at $2.5 million. He's actually a receiver, a slash kind of guy. You had Fournette at $2 million. It just goes to show you the way things are going, the way teams that have won the Super Bowl are built is around a really good quarterback and a really effective passing game. That's what that shows me.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the Browns are going against the grain with what they're doing, right? With how they're spending their money on the running backs, how they're spending their money on the offensive line, especially the interior of the offensive line, right? Those extensions for Teller and Bitonio that they signed in November. You can win like that. It's different. It might be harder. But I think that graphic, it shows what you said, Dave, that the easiest way to win a Super Bowl is with a big-time quarterback. Now, not everybody on that list was a big-time quarterback, but there were plenty. A lot of Tom Brady's and a lot of Patrick Mahomes. And if you do that, right, if you spend all your money there or a lot of your money there, it makes it tougher to devote resources to the running back. It becomes a second thought. But I also think, throughout the playoffs and even last night, there's different ways to win, right? The Rams tried to run it. They didn't open it up. The Bengals have Joe Burrow and those three receivers. It's not like they marched it up and down the field yesterday. So, you can win with the running game, you can win with defense, but if you're going to do it consistently, you're better off having a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, before we go to break, we're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. And this one kind of deals with roster construction.
Why does everyone figure we need new receivers? We have the same receiving core that we had when Baker put up these records, allegedly and supposedly. How is it that a receiver is supposed to catch a ball behind him? You're running full speed and have to reach behind you to catch the ball. The ball is either thrown behind or overhead. And he also is the reason that the receivers were hurt a lot of times, throwing them into dangerous situations. I don't care who the receiver is. No man can be running full speed and turn around and catch the ball behind him. And if he does catch the ball, he's going down right there. He doesn't get them the ball where they can have yak afterwards, get yards after the catch.
Scott, again, the accuracy is absolutely a problem this year with the wide receiving core and the quarterback play. They need if you didn't watch the Super Bowl and think, man, we need an upgrade in wide receivers, I'm not sure you were watching the same games I were, because I was thinking that the entire playoffs. Who in that receiving core threatens a defense? Tell me.
Yeah. No, you're right. But I also think the caller has a point that if you have an elite quarterback, he raises the level of the receivers around him. And we've seen that, historically, Aaron Rodgers and, Tom Brady. But if you don't, and if you have your quarterback plays below par, like Baker did this year, then it's tough for your receivers to look good. Having said that, when Odell left and Jarvis Landry was hurt, Donovan Peoples-Jones didn't get open enough. Rashard Higgins was a non-factor. Anthony Schwartz was pretty much a non-factor. And there were plenty of games where the receivers did not get the separation they needed to get. So, yeah, the receiving core needs an upgrade. They also need the quarterback to play better.
Yep, without question. Agree with that part of what the caller said and with what you're saying as well. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. One of our fans has an idea of what he wants to see the Browns do. We'll also have a free agency preview, Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources.
So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes.
Tri-C is where futures begin.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com, and I continue talking Browns. Time to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This viewer has some ideas of what he wants to see the Browns do in the offseason.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I think your show is really great, and I watch it often. I just want to talk about the offseason with the Browns and just my opinion on what they need to do. Honestly, the one thing that I think they should do is, number one, rehab Baker. I think the fact that he was hurt this entire year was a reason why he had such poor productivity, and he still took us to 9-7. You can compare it to last year. I also think that they need to keep David Njoku, and they need to cut Austin Hooper. I think Austin Hooper is a good tight end, but productivity-wise, I think Njoku was far beyond, and Harrison Bryant needs to stay as well. And another big thing is two other things, actually. Keep Dearness Johnson. I think having Chubb, Hunt, and Dearness Johnson on the same roster is going to put us over the top and going to set us apart from any other NFL team, and they need to re-sign him. They can get him for a good price now as opposed to when he goes off and gets a good price from somewhere else. And then also, at the same time, the defense is good, but we need to do something about our wide receivers. We need to keep Jarvis Landry because he's the leader on that team, and I think that that is actually something that we need to do. And I think that we are a Super Bowl contending team. I think they need to rehab Baker, and I don't care about the height issue. Russell Wilson is 2 inches shorter. Kyler Murray is a lot shorter than him, and they're doing pretty good. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, and appreciate the voicemail, as we appreciate all the voicemails. Lots to unpack there, Scott. I like the idea about Njoku. I think he is kind of ascending. Jarvis Landry, I think if he's willing to renegotiate, extend and bring down the cap number, I don't think at $15 million or whatever it is, it's up there. I'm not sure that that's a wise way to spend that money.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic, Dave, because I'm with you. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of cap space to use on, an aging receiver who's coming off a year that he was injured for the first time. And I'm not sure that Jarvis, wants to be here anymore. Who knows? He didn't talk at the end of the year. We know he's tight with Odell. On the other side is, if you're going to redo your receiving core, which you need to, you're going to have a veteran, and you're going to have a veteran who can lead. And I do think Jarvis is that guy. So, can you find somebody to fill that role cheaper? Maybe. Is he going to be as good as Jarvis? I'm not convinced of that. So I don't think it's a slam dunk that he's gone, but I would assume that he is gone. But yeah, it's a tough spot because then you're going to have to add conceivably a 1 and a 2 and maybe a 4 or 5, right? You'd probably need to add 3 receivers to Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz. And that's a lot to ask. Not that you can't remake that position, but when you're also trying to rehab or fix or add a new quarterback, that's a lot of change in your passing game. So I don't know if I'd be super quick to get rid of Jarvis, even though financially it's probably the move.
Yeah, very, very fair points. And especially the main point is, does Jarvis want to be here? And I think the Browns will probably be very respectful of that, given the way they feel about him. Pro Football Focus with a free agency preview. And the main thing here, Browns have $24.9 million is the projected cap space, 12th highest in the NFL. So they're in the upper third, roughly. You see the notable free agents. Would love to have Clowney and Njoku back. That's a error by our folks at Pro Football Focus. Sheldon Richardson isn't with the Browns. Potential cuts, Case Keenum. I can't imagine, Scott, the Browns re-signing Case Keenum. They clearly didn't want to play him when Baker was really, really banged up. So that was another head scratcher. But I guess the point, would love Clowney back. Some places are placing him at the 1 year, $15 million, 2 year, $25, $28 million. I'd probably do that. I think he paired well with Miles, and I think he just fit.
Yeah, he certainly played well, and he played like he hadn't played in years. The 9 sacks was more than he'd had in a long time. He was healthy for the most part. Only missed one game due to injury. Said at the end of the year he felt great. And I do think he paired well with Miles. And it's the same discussion with David Njoku, and it's probably the same discussion with all free agents. It's about the dollars. And, you know, if Clowney played for $9 million this year, right, and Njoku played for $6 million this year, well, they're going to get big bucks. And is Andrew Berry willing to pay, you know, Clowney $15 million for 1 year? Or like you said, maybe it's 26 over 2 years, with knowing he has a history of injuries, right? And maybe he just got lucky in 2021 and the injury bug will return. Are you willing to pay David Njoku $12 million a year when he might get that on the free agent market, and you have that money devoted to Austin Hooper? You know, you probably can get rid of Austin Hooper, bite the bullet on your cap space, and give that money to David Njoku. But it all comes down to, you know, value and is he worth it? And, you know, I lean toward keeping your own guys and maybe overspending for them as opposed to an unknown, you know, commodity, which is why I would think the Browns would make strong pushes for Clowney and Njoku. But I don't think they're givens that they resign just because I think they can command big money on the open market.
Yeah, absolutely, especially after the year Clowney had. You know, everybody's going to be after edge rushers. They're always in demand. And the same thing about Njoku, a young ascending tight end. This is from Bleacher Report. So potential landing spots for wide receiver Mike Williams. And they got the Browns listed near the top. Also on the list are the Colts, Raiders, Jaguars, and Chargers. Williams could provide the spark that the Browns are seeking, especially after cutting ties with Odell Beckham. And they go into the thing that Beckham's departure left a void of proven talent in the wide receiver room, and that is definitely something that the Browns will look to address. I'm kind of all over the place on Mike Williams. He's a legitimate number one, but he's kind of inconsistent. There are games where he looks like he is a Hall of Famer, and then there's 3 or 4 games where he's just kind of a guy there.
Yeah, and I think even within games, you know, I just remember that great Sunday night game against the Raiders, you know, to decide who went to the playoffs. And I think he had some drops, and then he made some big catches. The question for me about him is, you know, he's a different type of receiver, right? He's big, maybe long speed, but he's not a quick burst guy. It feels like he's always in tight coverage, right? There's not a lot of separation there. And I don't know if that's the kind of receiver the Browns are looking for. You know, they run a lot of crossing routes and slants. Like, I just wonder philosophically if he's a fit, because Donovan Peoples-Jones is in a similar mold. I think he's got a little more burst, but it takes a while for him to get up to speed too. You know, is Mike Williams the kind of guy that you really want? You know, and do you trust Baker to, okay, Baker, he's going to be covered, or whoever the quarterback is, he's going to be covered. You still got to throw it to him, right? So I think that's interesting. Off the top of my head, I say no, that he's not the kind of guy they want, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, I see the line of thinking. You know, the big target is something that they obviously probably are looking for. They do have Donovan Peoples-Jones, but again, all fair questions that will play out as free agency gets underway in it's a little over a month now, huh? All right. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns' passing offense.
Hi, I was just watching some of your videos here, and you talk about Baker. Well, you know, last year, Cincinnati Bengals won 4 games. What did they do? They went out and got receivers for the quarterback. I know Burrow was hurt, but Mayfield was hurt this year. I don't think any quarterback could do it with the receivers that we have. I'd like to hear what you got to say about that. Thank you.
And again, we appreciate the voicemail. I agree with him. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. He kind of referenced the Bengals. They took Jamar Chase. There was some talk about a left tackle, Penei Sewell. It caught up with them in the Super Bowl, but they don't make it to the Super Bowl without Jamar Chase. Again, go get playmakers. Find guys that threaten the defense.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Dave, especially in today's NFL. And the Browns, outside of their running game, don't have those guys. You know, Njoku is borderline, a guy that threatens the defense. You hope that he can evolve into that. You hope Anthony Schwartz can become that with his speed. You know, Donovan Peoples-Jones, we've seen glimpses on the deep balls. But without Odell, and it always comes back to Odell, without Odell, the Browns didn't have that in the receiving corps either the last 2 years. And I thought it stood out in the playoff loss to the Chiefs at the end of the 2020 season. So there's no doubt that they need to upgrade that receiving corps. Now, I don't remove responsibility from Baker and just say, oh, it was all about the receivers. I don't go there at all. But they need help at receiver. There's no doubt. And I would truly expect either a big free agent signing, or to me, more likely would be either the 13th pick in the draft or in the second round, you get a big name receiver coming in.
Yeah. And again, I agree with you. Baker Mayfield needs to play better. I think a wide receiver upgrade helps him play better. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take another timeout on the other side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talking about Kevin Stefanski and the odds of a team getting to next year's Super Bowl. We'll tell you where the Browns fall. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns head coach, Kevin Stefanski.
Just watching this year's Browns, the reason I believe Stefanski play calling and the record shows, what happens is a lot of the coaches got some read on them from last year when they did really good. Coaches then got some sort of papers on them, something to read on them so that their teams could pick up on it. The last year they had nothing on Stefanski. They didn't know what he was going to do. But once the next following year is, they had something on him so they can maneuver and adjust their defense to what he's doing. And to his offense, it's very predictable. I'm sitting back watching, and I could detect what call was made, run call, pass call, so other teams can adjust to what he was doing. Besides the other things, the quarterback issues, the line issues. But that was basically the half of the focus of the downfall of the offense.
So what about it, Scott Petrick? Did the rest of the league catch up to him? Kevin Stefanski said there was going to be tweaks and no 2 years are the same. I remember him saying that. Too predictable?
Maybe. I don't put all of it on Kevin Stefanski, but I certainly give some of the blame / responsibility to Stefanski as a play caller, as the guy designing the offense. The passing game wasn't good enough, and it wasn't, just Baker Mayfield. It wasn't just the receivers. I'm not sure the concepts were good enough. Now, again, that's tough to judge. If your quarterback's making all the great throws, maybe your calls look better, right? And I can think of games where I thought the calls were good. Green Bay, I thought the calls were good, and Baker just did not deliver. But, if you look at the course of a 17-game season, there were plenty of issues with Kevin Stefanski. I think he would admit that. I think there's plenty of room to self-scout and evaluate and say, okay, this needs to be better. Does he use 13 personnel, the 3 tight ends? Does he use that too much? Can you run it better out of 3 receiver sets? Like main questions, like big foundational questions. I think he thinks he knows the answer, but after a difficult season, you want to re-examine everything. So I think he'll be fine. I think he's smart enough. I think his staff is good enough that they'll figure things out. But I do think there's some truth to year 2, opponents and defenses made adjustments and figured some stuff out.
Yeah, it seemed like the defense got a feel for the way the Browns were going to run their offense. All right, this one from Caesars Sportsbook. Odds to win the Super Bowl a year from now, and the Browns are at plus 4,000. Same neighborhood as the Seahawks, the Eagles, the Dolphins, and the Raiders are at plus 5,000. The favorites, the Chiefs, plus 700. The Bills are plus 750. The Bengals are up there as one of the favorites. The Ravens were plus 2,000. So when you look at that, think about how in the offseason, after the rosters were constructed, Browns were one of the favorites. They're kind of middle of the pack right now as far as the odds makers go.
Yeah, I think so much of that is about the quarterback situation, right? I mean, you know what Kansas City has. You know what Cincinnati has. And the teams that the Browns are grouped with there, Philly, Miami, there's questions about those quarterbacks, young guys, Tua, Jalen Hurts. How are they going to perform? And, even, who knows what's going to happen in Vegas with their quarterback situation. Seattle, if Russell Wilson's going to go back. So I feel like the Browns roster overall is talented enough to be in consideration for playoff / Super Bowl. It all comes down to, do you trust the quarterback and who is going to be a quarterback? And I think that's why the Browns are where they are in the odds.
Yep. And again, that'll start ironing itself out in middle to end of March and April with the draft and free agency. All right, we're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one, an interesting question by this viewer.
If the Browns had to do it all over again in the 2018 NFL draft, would they still take Baker Mayfield, or would they take like a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson and someone else? And my second question is, do you think the Browns have enough cap space if they re-sign Denzel Ward and they make moves in the offseason or whatever? Do you think they'll keep Jadeveon Clowney? Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Scott, I'll turn that over to you. If they could redraft, knowing what they know now, 2018, who do you think they take?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a no-brainer, Josh Allen. I just think he would fit here, in the bad weather. He throws it great. He's a running threat. He seems happy in Buffalo, so he could be happy in Cleveland. Played at a near MVP level the last couple of seasons. Led his team, into the playoffs, win a little bit in the playoffs. Played great in that loss to the Chiefs. So, I think it's Josh Allen. I think Lamar Jackson would be second. And I know not everybody's a huge fan of his style, but he's an MVP. He elevates everybody around him. There's a lot to like. I think he's only going to get better as a passer. So I think Baker would be third. And then the second part of the question is, I think there's enough cap room, even if you sign Denzel to an extension, which I expect to happen at some point. To me, part of it is, does Clowney want to be here? And I know he liked being here. I know he liked Myles Garrett. Chris Kiffin, the D-line coach, coming back after he left to go to University of Mississippi might help. But Jadeveon likes the warm weather, so maybe if he gets an offer from a Miami or New Orleans, maybe that is enough for him to say, no, I'm going to go there.
Yeah, and again, he's certain to draw interest because he played well, without question. All right, one more voicemail of Truth and Reason before we head to break. This one, again, about the Browns' passing offense. Popular topic.
Hey, this is Dion from Macklin. Got a question about our receivers. Why is everybody so quick to give up on the receivers? We can't even give a fair assessment of the receivers because the quarterback play was so bad.
Well, Scott, I would say the quarterback play was bad. But there wasn't, and we've kind of alluded to it and danced around, there wasn't the separation that you want to see. Jarvis was playing with a sprained MCL. So he's playing on 1.5 legs. I'll give him that. But, man, if you can't look at that and say, there is nobody in that receiving core that the defense is going to sit there and say, man, if he gets the ball, we are in trouble. We got to know who is that guy?
Yeah, he's not there, I don't think. But I will, from the caller, I will say it's too early to make a final judgment on who Donovan Peoples-Jones is. Because he looked good in limited attempts as a rookie, had an outstanding second training camp, and then kind of plateaued in the second season. I thought there were still glimpses. A couple of drops, a big drop early in that Baltimore game. You mentioned the lack of separation. I think that is true. I think he probably doesn't run the whole route tree like you need him to, right? There's certain routes you can run him on and he'd have more success just because it takes longer to get going and things like that. But he's a bigger body. I thought at some point maybe he could be a 2. He's probably better off as a 3rd receiver, right? So it means you got to go get 2 guys or keep Jarvis and go get a number 1. But I think it's unfair to judge exactly who Donovan Peoples-Jones can be. And the same for Anthony Schwartz, right? He wasn't on the field enough, but he's got to prove that he's a football player and not just a fast guy. And he just didn't get enough chances. He was hurt. He had other issues. But he's got a lot of improvement to make to become that guy that scares the defense more than kind of as a fluke guy.
Yeah, and the other thing about Donovan Peoples-Jones, remember, they drafted him as kind of a project guy. He was a late pick. And then when Odell left, Jarvis is banged up. He kind of got thrown up the receiving chain pretty quickly, probably quicker than the Browns really wanted him to. So keep that in that perspective as well. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside one more time out. A couple of more voicemails of Truth and Reason, some mock drafts. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns with Browns beat reporter Scott Petrick. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, my name is Drake Russell, and if I was the Browns right now, I'm pretty sure Baker Mayfield needs to be learning the playbook. I'm not saying that he hasn't, but he needs to be doing a better job at quarterback. Like watching the Browns going to 11-5 the first season and then going 8-8. Hurts as a Browns fan. And if I was the Browns right now, looking for a wide receiver in the draft. Easily. That's all I have to say.
And Scott, we've touched on it. I certainly think there will be a wide receiver or 2. They'll look for developmental guys and guys that can come right in and help. So the passing game needs to get upgraded.
It does. And, I'm sure Baker spent plenty of time in the playbook, but I think there is something to be said for he needs to be better seeing the field and reading defenses because it wasn't just inaccuracy. There are plays that he missed guys running open, right? So he needs a lot of work in plenty of different areas. And I don't think you can just say, it was the shoulder. And we've talked about that a million times. But there has to be, he needs to watch a bunch of film and see where he can get better during the offseason. And as far as receiver, to me, the only question is, well, do they spend a bunch of money in free agency? And I'm not convinced they will. Or do they take a guy at 13 or wait into the second round? And I think philosophically, they'd say ideally they would wait into the second round. But I think this might be a draft in a scenario where they just need to bite the bullet and take a guy at 13 because they need that much help at receiver.
So we're going to take a look at a couple mock drafts. So Pro Football Focus mock draft. And they have the Browns taking Jameson Williams from Alabama. Now, that's the guy that tore up his ACL. They mention his speed, which is attractive. Added note on this one. In this mock draft, they have the Seahawks trading Russell Wilson to the Eagles, who pick a couple of picks after the Browns for multiple first-rounders. I just throwing that out there because they think that Russell Wilson is going to get dealt. Again, Jameson Williams is an intriguing guy, but I don't know that you draft a guy who's coming off of an ACL late in the college thing that high up.
Yeah, you certainly have to be really comfortable with the medicals, right? And be able to wrap your head around it. And that pick would almost feel like, okay, a down the road kind of pick. And I just don't think the Browns are in that situation. For so many years they were. But this, 2021 felt like a wasted season. You can't have 2022 be a wasted season. And I feel that way at quarterback and receiver, right? I mean, if you decide as an organization Baker's not the guy, then you can't just give him another year to give him another year, right? You have to have a plan B. Even if you start Baker week 1, there's got to be a plan B if he struggles again. And so I don't know. I would have to get over the initial negativity toward drafting a receiver who might not be ready to go week 1. They might be a little short-sighted, but that's kind of how I feel about it right now.
Yeah, that was my initial reaction as well. We're going to take a look at another mock draft. This one is Tom Fornelli from CBS Sports. He has the Browns selecting an edge rusher, George Kaloftis from Purdue. And that's a guy that came in early, quick, powerful guy. I certainly think if they don't take a wide receiver at 13, edge rusher would likely be what they do. And we might get a better feel for that based on who is signed in free agency as well.
No doubt. If Clowney's not back, then I think edge rusher might replace receiver. You can have that argument, right? Because you're already invested so heavily in Miles. But we saw last year, we saw the year before with Olivier Vernon. You need a bookend for Myles Garrett. Just looking at the numbers there, Kalafdis is a big end, 6'4", 275. I mean, that's Miles kind of size, maybe even bigger, heavier than Miles. That's probably 20 or 30 pounds heavier than Clowney. So that would be an interesting selection. They need help across the D-line. They need help in the defensive interior, especially with what happened with Malik McDowell. Malik Jackson's expected to leave. So, to me, it's receiver and defensive line. We can talk a lot about that before the draft.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, before we let you go, one more voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the draft.
Hey, I'm a longtime Cleveland Browns fan in Toledo, Ohio. My name is Tony Frost, and I've been a Browns fan since the early 70s. And I just want to say, regarding to the draft, I've seen Traylon Burke out of Arkansas, receiver, 6'3", runs a 4.40. Great hands. He supposedly has the biggest hands in the SEC, and I say we should go after him.
Scott, I said last week that I hadn't seen a lot of Arkansas football. I went and Googled Traylon Burks and looked at some of his highlight things. I like him a lot. Big guy. The thing is, there are multiple things where he takes a bubble screen and splits defenders. So he might have 4.4, 4.5. He's got football speed. He runs away from guys in the SEC. The Browns do have this front office seems to like guys from the SEC. I'm really intrigued. That's a guy that played Wildcat quarterback. The size of his hands allegedly 5X. So those are big guys that like to grab the football. I'm in on Traylon Burks after, and I know it's this highlight clip film, and you're not going to put bad highlights on a highlight film. But man, this guy is a physical specimen.
Yeah, I mean, big guys that can run and catch. There's nothing. It's hard to argue with that. I'm not sure he'll be there at 13. I've seen some mocks that have him going higher than that, but certainly he's in that discussion. I have not gone all in on my draft study yet, and I'm supposed to leave for the combine in 2 weeks from today, so I got to get up to speed on that. But he's certainly a guy I'll watch, and he's in that discussion, right? And you hope, if you're the Browns and you want to take a receiver, you hope maybe he falls. You got the Alabama kid, you got the 2 guys from Ohio State, right? Those are guys we're going to be talking plenty about, but I've heard a lot of good things about the Arkansas guy for sure.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read his stuff, brownzone.com on the internet. Scott, as always, man, thanks so much for taking the time and giving us the insight. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave.
All right.
Thanks.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. Turn our attention to the Cavs. Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to try-c.edu to check out our programs and resources.
So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes.
Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We turn our attention to the Cavs All-Star Game in town this coming weekend. Some news that affects the Cavs. James Harden will not play in Sunday's NBA All-Star Game. That's coming from Keith Pompey from the Sixers, his beat reporter. That means there is an opening on the East squad. Jarrett Allen, one of the guys that will be considered, and in J.B. Bickerstaff's mind, really the only choice.
If he's not, it'll be truly disappointing. I don't know of anybody else, and I'm not knocking anyone else. And obviously I'm biased, but I don't know of anybody who deserves it more. You know, again, if you talk about valuing the things that we're supposed to value as a league and highlighting that, it's guys' impact on winning and being high character people and teammates. You know, because of Jarrett and what he's done for this team, you know, we are where we are right now in a competitive Eastern Conference. You know, as a human being who showcases everything and every value that the league is about and wants from its players, Jarrett Allen is all of those things. You know, he's not in, you know, out highlighting himself. You know, all he worries about is helping this basketball team win basketball games and contributes at a high level. So there is no other replacement in my mind.
J.B. Bickerstaff about Jarrett Allen possibly being named to the Eastern Conference All-Star team by Commissioner Adam Silver. Let's welcome in Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. And Evan, when you look at it, guy's averaging a double-double. He's shooting 67% from the field. Again, there are so many deserving guys. Jarrett Allen near the top of that list.
He definitely is the top of the list if you look at it at the end of the day. It's definitely tricky, but thankfully he was named actually moments before I came on to that as the replacement for James Harden. So it's definitely well-deserved. I think J.B. Bickerstaff hit the nail on the head that if you want to reward winning and you want to reward the host team, why don't you name the guy who's been integral to their defensive turnaround, who's just kind of arguably their defensive anchor, and Jarrett Allen too. The All-Star team, even if he's a reserve, and Kevin Love gave some good consideration and just credit as well, saying that it doesn't matter at the end of the day how you get in, as long as you're named there. And Love reiterated that Allen was more than deserving to get there. And I know people will make a case for Pascal Siakam as well because he's been red hot with the Raptors as of late. But again, it's as of late, but Allen has consistently been good. Like you said, a double-double in the entire season and just a key piece in why Cleveland's winning.
Yeah, and again, so breaking news here, Jarrett Allen named to the Eastern Conference All-Star team. So well-deserved, well done, Adam Silver. All right, so J.B. Bickerstaff, and I know you were listening as well, asked on the areas that the Cavs need to continue to improve after the break as they kind of try to get that push and maintain that push towards the top spot in the Eastern Conference. Here is J.B. Bickerstaff on what he wants to see from his Cavs in the second half of the season.
Consistency on the offensive end of the floor, versus pressure, versus physicality, the continued movement, the ball movement, body movement. I think those are things. And again, integrating Karras into what we're doing offensively and finding that consistency there.
So, Evan, the question is, and we've talked about it a little bit, Cavs have struggled a little bit offensively. Is that kind of a fatigue thing? Are they hitting the wall? Keep in mind, these are all young guys that aren't used to, getting their bodies beat on for 82 games in an NBA season.
I think it's a little bit of everything if you really look at it at the end of the day. I think fatigue definitely does play a factor. Like you said, this is a younger team who has been playing full-board basketball for 48 minutes almost every night for nearly 60 games. You're going to look tired. You're going to show some fatigue. You definitely see with Evan Mobley right now, but he's hitting a rookie wall, which is natural. I think the youth of this team just maybe realizing they don't have the energy to stretch this out over a full 82 games is realistic. I think this Cavs team will still play hard. I think they'll still play their best. Most teams will say that they look forward to the All-Star break. They won't publicly say it or just say, they can't wait to have a full week off. But having a time to kind of rest, relax, recharge, get everything set, so you can just head back out there and look sharp for the remaining 20 or so games in the season really helps a lot. And I think Bickerstaff is saying all the right things. They still need to get Caris LeVert integrated. He said he's running more of a pick-and-roll heavy vanilla scheme for him, and he doesn't have a full grasp of Cleveland's offense. And I think when he does, that'll kind of unlock things further for them. Darius Garland being fully healthy will obviously be beneficial. Rajon Rondo kind of being fully recovered from that hamstring injury of his would also be beneficial for this team as well. There's a few things that could fall into place for the Cavs as they continue to get healthy, and using this break to just kind of leapfrog that. And Bickerstaff also mentioned just in terms of just practicing and play time and just rotations, his staff will be cognizant of that going forward. They are well aware that this isn't a sprint. This is a marathon that this entire season is. And they don't want to necessarily push things further than they need to, especially if they want to make a deeper playoff run than just be a quick first-round exit.
Yeah, you mentioned Garland. The Cavs have been beat up, and that's another thing. Not only are they young and beat up, and still finding a way to compete. So there are plenty of good signs that they're showing out on the court as well.
Yeah, there definitely is. Garland is well deserving of the All-Star honors, like Jared Allen. He the back issue has been kind of a thing since they played Golden State in San Francisco. He tweaked it then. He tweaked it again when Cleveland hosted Milwaukee when they defeated them, and he sat out for maybe the end of the third and was back at the start of the fourth. He played against the Pistons, and when the Cleveland had arguably their worst loss of the season, then was kind of shut down for a few games, is slowly getting back. I didn't even mention Lauri Markkanen, who's been sidelined for a little bit now due to a high ankle sprain. He's kind of key to what they're doing, especially when they want to play with three bigs as well. There's a lot of different pieces at play, but I think Garland could definitely use this time off just to rest and maybe give his back a little bit of a break. I asked Bickerstaff about it a little bit, and I said, do you have any advice for these guys as they're heading into the break, especially the ones that are just kind of being a part of their first All-Star festivities? He said he wants them to enjoy it and take in the moment, but please, please, please try to find time to rest and recover so that they can come back fully ready to go next week when I think they play Detroit on Thursday.
Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Now I'm going to step aside, take a timeout. On the other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, a question about the post-deadline Eastern Conference. We will also talk a little bit more about the Cavs as they get ready for the second half of the season. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
But if we are to meet our needs, a large part of the answer must come and will come from eliminating the discrimination which deprives us of the full use of the talents of young, non-white Americans.
Zelma George, a former United Nations delegate, answers Johnson's call. As director of the Cleveland Job Corps, she oversees the training of over 12,000 women. Today, the Zelma George Center carries on her tradition of service.
We continue talking Cavs. Time for us to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Cavs in the second half of the season.
With the NBA trade deadline and everything passing and all the massive trades like James Harden to Philly and the Nets getting Ben Simmons and Seth Curry and Andre Drummond, etc. Like, what are the Cavs' chances to win the title after all those trades and everything went down?
All right, we certainly appreciate the voicemails. And, when you look at this, Evan, I think Cavs are a couple years, I won't say a couple years. Cavs are ahead of schedule. I don't think anybody saw this as the breakout season in the rebuild, but, they got there. I think the goal for the Cavs should be make the playoffs, host a playoff series, win a first-round playoff series. If you do those three things, it's been a great year. The Nets are going to be tough. The Bucks are going to be tough. 76ers are going to be tough. Those three, in my mind, even the Heat, those kind of three or four are kind of the heavyweights in the East. Cavs are there, but again, it's young in the first time being in that intense playoff-type basketball.
Yeah, but the NBA playoffs are a different beast than the regular season. I think the joke for a while was Mike Budenholzer with the Milwaukee Bucks. He was a great regular season coach, but didn't know how to adjust to teams zeroing in on you and just trying to exploit your mismatches and weaknesses. That's what made Ty Lue such a great coach for the Cavs when he was kind of vanilla and the Cavs would just get through the regular seasons, but as soon as they went to the playoffs, they flipped the switch. They looked like a completely different monster out there. I think there's going to be some pressure, I think, both internally just for these young guys who want to go out there and win for this city and win for the Cavs organization in general, because it's a big deal. It'll be the first time that the team under Dan Gilbert's ownership has made the playoffs without LeBron James on their roster, so that's certainly significant in itself. And you have to consider that and just the added pressure, like I said, of just teams zeroing in on you and just kind of figuring out what your weakness is, maybe some exploits are. It depends on who they play, too, because like you said, there is certainly an upper echelon. Ever since Philadelphia made that trade to get James Harden, I agree they're in the conversation. I've always felt Brooklyn was there just because they already have Kevin Durant, who's arguably one of the best players at his position, and Kyrie Irving, when he is available, is helpful. Miami has been consistently great this year, especially on defense. Milwaukee are the defending champions, so you have to give them the respect as they deserve it. And, like, the Cavs can be in the mix record-wise with those guys. I mean, Chicago, too. They're a team that needs to prove it, I think, still, just because they are a young team. But they are equipped right now, at least record-wise and personnel-wise, to really make some noise in the playoffs. It's gonna be a hard race for the Cavs. I'm interested to see who they draw in the first round. I think that might come into consideration down the stretch. Do they want to see Philadelphia for a 7-game series? Do they want to see Brooklyn? Or do they want to maybe play Chicago or try and sneak in and make the race for the first seed so they can kind of have their pick of playing the weakest team possible? There's a lot of variables at play. And like you said, I think getting to the playoffs is already an accomplishment in itself and should be celebrated because nobody had the Cavs being a playoff team. And if you have that on your bingo card, congratulations, check it off. You are one step closer to winning something, I guess. But getting there is an accomplishment. Like you said, hosting a first-round series is an accomplishment. I think that is easily obtainable for them. And getting out of the first round could be possible. It depends on who they play, obviously. I can't see into the future. If I would, probably be betting on the lottery at this point. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this Cavs team responds because the playoffs are certainly a different beast, and it'll be a lot of fun either way because, again, the expectations were less than lower for this team this season, and them to kind of just shatter every preconceived notion and continue to do so just makes it more compelling to watch where they end up.
And the flip side of it is they will be a little bit of a tough matchup because of the three bigs that they have, the 3 7-footers. You kind of saw a little bit about the intensity in that game against the 76ers had a little bit of a playoff flair to it, and you saw they fell behind, they came back, and then just kind of didn't have that next level to get to. So I think that'll be a learning. I think that 76ers loss that they had this weekend will be a learning key for them as they move forward towards the playoffs too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And if you asked Kevin Love today, he said the same thing, that it was disappointing for the Cavs you could really see it on JV Bickerstaff's face that he was disappointed that they were in that game for the better part of it and they still ended up losing. It's tough. They went to a hostile environment and lost to the Sixers. And they're definitely amped up after trading for James Harden, rightfully so. He's a huge difference maker for them. But to get back to my point, Kevin Love said the same thing, that, yeah, in the moment the team was disappointed, but they're coming in with a fresh perspective on Monday during practice before they go play Atlanta before the All-Star break, saying that, hey, this is what a playoff atmosphere is like. This was a tough, intense game. This is a team that stylistically matches up with us really well. Do we want to face them in the playoffs? If we do, what adjustments and things can we make to make it a little easier on ourselves? I think another good example is if you look how Cleveland played Milwaukee this season. In the second game, they played the Bucks because the first one, Giannis and Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton were unavailable due to COVID. The Bucks really threw Drew Holiday at Darius Garland to make him uncomfortable for the entire game. And you wondered then, because the Cavs are kind of echoing the same sentiments they did after the loss to Philadelphia, what adjustments will they make when they play the Sixers again? Because Cleveland made clear adjustments the third time they played Milwaukee, where they made sure Drew Holiday wasn't defending Garland that much. They forced a lot of screens. They forced a lot of switches. They tried to make Holiday uncomfortable. They tried to make the Bucks uncomfortable with their physicality. So this Cavs team has had tests like this in the past, and I'm interested to see how they play Philly. It's certainly unique that this is the first time they've already played them this season, and they still have 3 more games to go against them. But I'm interested to see what adjustments they make because it was a good playoff caliber test, like you said.
Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Evan, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Evan Dammarell from the Locked On Cavs podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest Hayden Grove from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Casey Kinnaman from Dog Pound Daily. That's tomorrow at 4. Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a good night, everybody.